Hello and welcome to Arkham Audio. Today we have the guys and gal from the Stars Are Right podcast, and we're going to be going through what they're doing and the things that they're currently working on as well. We've got their podcast where they actually do their playthrough, as well as some of their businesses and startup ideas that they have going on. And so I'd like to start off and introduce you to their keeper, Fedra, and she's going to get the ball rolling.
Yes, hello, I'm Fedra, the keeper and co-founder of Stars Are Right. Basically, we're, as Nathan's already said, thank you, we're an actual play podcast playing Call of Cthulhu 7th edition at the moment. And also we have plans to offer editing, art, proofreading, playtesting packages for scenarios to go on the Miskatonic repository. We'll talk more about that soon. Without further ado, I will introduce fellow co-founders, Howl and Braden.
I'll start because you said my name first. Hi, I'm Adriano, aka Howl. I play Dr. Eudora Lockhart currently on the podcast as we're playing through Children of Fear, having an absolute blast with her. As we do more one-shots and things in the future, I'll be playing other people, looking forward to that. And other than that, I'm very pleased to be on this team where I mainly do the pictures. So I designed our logo, I've been developing the revamp of our website for the last few weeks, and I offer my services for illustrations for publishing, well, people who are publishing their homebrews on Miskatonic and want that bit of extra pizzazz and polish and maybe a nice painted cover, some NPC portraits, that sort of thing.
Nice. Hey, Braden here. I play Sofian Bazaz Wine in the podcast. I am also one of the founders, and I've been having a lot of fun playing Children of Fear. I'm excited to talk to Lynn later. You'll hear me eventually. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay.
Mystery.
Oh, mystery, yes. You'll probably hear me as a keeper on our podcast very, very soon, as we are going to be releasing a scenario that I have written in the next month or so. So look forward to that.
Very exciting.
So how did y'all decide that you were going to play the Children of Fear as one of your starting games that you guys were going to put out?
Well, it's very simple. I'll start at the beginning. The pandemic hit, as everyone probably already knows, hopefully already knows. And I decided to start playing Call of Cthulhu for the first time ever. I joined Call of Cthulhu Discord server, where we all still are today, and I made some friends. And it took me a few months of keeping games just for Adriano, just the two of us, and keeping a little campaign one-on-one, until I gathered the courage to run Mr. Corbett, the one-shot, for a group of friends that I met on the server, plus a random person that is now also a friend. And I had such a good time playing with them that I was like, hey, what if we kind of keep this as a little group where I can run games first with you to get my confidence up and get it, improved. And as I was getting excited about keeping games because I was really enjoying it, I was like, I'd like to play a campaign. So I said to myself, the next campaign that Chaosium is putting out, I'm going to run. I don't know what it's going to be, but whatever it's going to be, I'm going to run it. And then the Children of Fear came out, and I was like, this one, this was the one I'm going to run. It's happening. So I talked to them, and I was like, hey, how about if I run this campaign? And they were like, oh yeah, that'd be really nice. And then a few days later, I was like, how about I do it in a podcast? And that was how the Children of Fear, no, that was how Stars Are Right were born. Everyone said yes, and it was very exciting. And then I started preparing it from the PDF as fast as I could to get it out as the new and exciting Chaosium thing. I was hoping quite a few people would be keen to listen to it because it hadn't been already done.
How many
Yeah.
people do you currently have following your podcast?
It's a bit difficult to know. We're almost we're nearing 2,000 downloads.
Wow.
Since we only launched like a couple of months ago, yeah, where we're almost 1,000 a month. Obviously, that could be 1,000 people every month just playing a random episode and deciding they don't like us. But we like to hope that some of them are sticking around.
Yeah, it's been big growth since July. It's been really exciting time. We have
It's been very cool.
a fair few people in our like Stars Are Right Discord server as well, which is nice to see interact and talk about the episodes and see how they're doing. And it's always nice to see what they're excited about. There's a little like Stars Are Right podcast chat where everything is in spoilers so that people who have caught up can see them, but other people can't. And it's been really nice reading the reviews, and it's difficult to tell you exactly a number because there might be people listening that haven't come forward to say, hi, we're listening to you, we like you. If you are one of those people, please come forward. We really like it when
come
you
chat.
like it.
We're nice. The server's open. Please join it. It's such a delight talking to the listeners, honestly. Having people get excited about an in-joke from an episode that that we might have recorded weeks ago and have since edited and uploaded and kind of forgotten about, and now we're like several sessions on in the campaign and someone's like, and then you did this, and we're like, yeah, we did, that was hilarious.
So fun. A lot of in-jokes as well.
That's awesome. So what preparation did you have to do is this your first podcast you've ever done?
For me, yes.
What breaking into all the audio editing and video editing, or sorry, not video, but like just the general setup and all that kind of stuff. Was it overwhelming? Did you have any kind of craziness to get ready to do that?
Well, I don't have any podcast experience, but both my co-founders have a little bit of podcast experience each, which
Nice.
Really, really helped. And
Braden actually got some listeners on his other podcast as well, so bonus.
There you go.
Yeah, I used to do a paranormal podcast, which is now stopped, but I was editing. I think I edited up. It would have been like 300 hours of audio or something like that. So, yeah, I've got a decent amount of experience behind me. Yeah.
And of course, we have our co-editor, Jason, who really, helped out very much with kind of the initial setup, testing the mics, giving us advice on which brands to buy. And yeah, he's been like an amazing support behind the scenes throughout this whole time. And he does appear in some one-shots soon.
You'll hear him on the show.
The listeners will get to meet him.
What episode are you currently on with your podcast?
Children of Fear wise, I believe we've recorded 21 episodes. That's 11 having come out, so we have a bit of a bank. And also we've recorded 10 episodes of the one shot that's coming out of the homebrew scenario. One shot.
10 sessions.
One shots. Yeah, 10 episodes of Braden scenario, Heartless and Loveland, that's coming out very soon. And those will alternate with the Children of Fear when the Miskatonic repository PDF gets released.
And typically when you do an episode of your podcast, how long does it generally last? Like how long is your play session? And then do you take a play session and then chop it up into multiple podcasts, or is it just one session equals one podcast?
So when we play, we usually play for around an hour and a half. Then we have a 10 to 15 minute segment post show, which is like a post show discussion, which we release to our Patreon. And then we'll have a 10-minute break.
Beyond the madness.
Yeah, beyond the madness.
And
then we'll have a 10-minute break and then come back and record another hour and a half and then do another 10-minute after that.
Nice.
So we're doing two episodes per play, or per day that we are recording. Yeah.
And do you typically record once a week, once every other week, or?
Yeah, once a week. It helps a bit that we're doing 2 episodes in sort of in this format, as we've got a significant bank that we can sort of fall back on if people are sick or something else. Yeah, exactly.
And so is the one shot that you're currently doing, Braden, what is that called again?
Heartless in Loveland.
Heartless in Loveland. And what was your inspiration for that podcast? When are you going to start airing that one out?
It'll be releasing soon, in about a month or two, depending on when the PDF comes out. But when I was doing my paranormal podcast prior to this one, I had researched this location called Loveland, Ohio, and there was this very strange sort of cryptid that calls the town home. This like lake that runs through the middle of the town called the Loveland Frogman. It's just like a humanoid frog thing. And then from there, I started researching into the town a little more, and I just found all these interesting things that I could use for this scenario. Like there's a castle in the town, there's all, yeah,
Middle of Ohio.
Yeah, right. Such a strange place. And I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to set a scenario there.
Nice.
And so it kind of follows on from the real world accounts of the Loveland Frogman, and then adds in some extra sprinkle of weirdness that I've chucked in there.
So would you say that like your production of this module, this one shot that you guys are doing, did you use like the services that you would be providing to your potential customers in the business aspect that we're going to be talking about a little bit later?
Yeah, yes, indeed. Fedra's been doing lots of editing for me, which has been lovely. And Adriano's done all the artwork, and things are looking great. I've been really enjoying getting sent, early drafts of the images and then the finished product. I just, I'm a big fan of his artwork. So every time I get sent something, I'm like freaking out.
Yeah, I was looking at Adriano's Deviant page, and there's this like humanoid, weird looking frog thing, and I was like, oh, and now that all makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
there we go.
I was like, okay, well, there you go. Awesome. Okay, so what are some of your favorite highlights that you guys have been through on the Children of Fear, and favorite moments that you've kind of gone through in your playthrough so far?
That's a tricky one to address without spoilers, and we want to keep this spoiler free for people, finding us for the first time. Yep. So don't worry, you don't have to pause the video. For me personally, we're playing the Pregens, or all but one of the Pregens, because we want to give people kind of all but two. Sorry, that's right. We don't have the assistant. We don't have Eudora's husband. We wanted to kind of give people the experience. If you're a keeper, you're thinking of buying it or running it. This is more or less what you're going to get with people playing these characters and so on. And Eudora Lockhart, my character, doesn't have any points in her social skills, and doesn't have very much in Chinese, and the starting location is in China. So I think the first couple of episodes are largely characterized not just by getting like the story hook and like the first thing that draws you into the adventure and the first little bits of creepy weirdness, but also just a lot of farcical buffoonery from Eudora, like getting stuff spilled on her, like falling over, misinterpreting announcements in Chinese, thinking she's in danger when she isn't. That for me has been like, I've yet to recapture the high of like, I think I was hiding in like a tram bathroom at one point, probably didn't exist, but whatever, believing that like terrorists were attacking or something when it was just a power car. I don't think that's much of a spoiler. Eudora's an idiot, but a lot of fun basically is the takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brandon, what's the favorite part of your character that you enjoy playing?
I've been really enjoying all the NPCs. Fedra's doing a great job of bringing them to life. Her voices are on point. Specific old men voices are fantastic.
I think we're gonna have to hear some of those voices. That's one of my personal weaknesses when I'm playing Keeper. I just cannot do voices for anything. So they all start off semi-unique, but all like eventually come to the same guy.
Yeah, don't worry, the same applies to me as well. There's very specific voices, like the old man voice, that I can maintain. Everything else just kind of merges into one soon enough.
I have a similar issue where everything just starts sounding very Australian very quick.
You just run adventures that take place in Australia and you're good.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to work on something.
We have a listener that does not believe that Braden is Australian and thinks he's actually English pretending to be Australian. So
Oh yeah,
that
that's
is
our
up for
best piece of
debate.
feedback so far.
Yeah, I'm not Australian enough.
See, that's when we turn the cameras like where Fedra is and shows them it's nighttime, and then it's daytime where you're at. So
Yeah.
that you see, here we go.
We've tried to convince them; they still don't believe. So,
They do say that his location doesn't really determine his heritage.
Well, that is true. So
yeah.
what is the Beyond the Madness, the 15 minutes that you guys are talking about after the show that you mentioned? What is that exactly, and how do I get access to that?
Yeah, well, Beyond the Madness is kind of a combination of, when you finish a game and it's like end scene, and then everyone's like, wow, that was great. I particularly like this and this. And they ask questions to the keeper, and the keeper's like, oh, yeah, I can't tell you this yet, but I can tell you this. And this is what would have happened if you decided to go this way as opposed to this way. So there's a bit of that where we all kind of have a good time saying our favorite things about what happened in this episode. There's also a bit of kind of advice giving for keepers that might consider running the Children of Fear. So kind of like, not a lot of advice was given for this part, so I had to make a lot of things, or maybe that was potentially kind of not made clear enough. So it's important to watch for this pitfall. If you present this in a way your players might misunderstand. So there's a little bit of that kind of giving advice to keepers, asking questions that the audience might have wanted to ask of me, the players, and a lot of laughing and making jokes, which is something we can't help but do in any occasion, in any situation. And all of that can be accessed on our Patreon at the Cult Elder tier level.
Links will be in the description.
And it's basically 10 to 15 minute Beyond the Madness for every single episode so far. So for everyone joining right now, they would get a backlog to listen of our voices from the start of the campaign. So it's a great deal.
And other bonus episodes to come for the same tier as well. So shortly to be released.
All right. So now that we've discussed Beyond the Madness and what you're currently working on, where do you guys see your podcast going on in the future? What are your future projects that you guys want to work on?
Well, we'd like to run whatever campaign is released next. Keep ourselves, on the cutting edge of Call of Cthulhu, I suppose. And then from there, to sort of go in blind to the new scenarios that are coming out. Because, running Master Nyarlathotep and Horror on the Orient Express, they're great, amazing scenarios and campaigns, but everyone has an idea of what happens in them, I think. Like, they've been around long enough to where everyone has heard spoilers and stuff. So going in completely blind is like very, very exciting.
Are you only going to be sticking to Call of Cthulhu, or are you going to do other systems, other horror systems, other systems as well?
I think we are just sticking to Call of Cthulhu. Yeah.
For now, those are the plans. We kind of leaving it open, but yeah, we have no plans to branch out. And of course, aside of the newest campaign, we'll keep doing the homebrews that are published, either our own homebrews that we're publishing, or other people who get our publishing package will also get their stories on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of that's going to be new and fresh hitting the podcast over the next month or two. Braden is our launch. Heartless in Loveland is going to be our first showcase of one of our own originals, and there's so many more ideas in the pipeline. Yeah. These two are unstoppable, to be honest. Like, I keep seeing their list of like, oh, I should write a scenario about, like, their list of ideas just keeps on growing. Sadly, time is what it is, so we can't get them all, polished and finished. But as we've already said, we've got like a crazy number of episodes already recorded. So Heartless in Loveland is chambered and ready to go. Once the PDF is ready. And then after that, we're hoping to keep up a pretty steady stream. So at the moment, it's been all Children of Fear all the time, which is great. Sorry, listeners, you're probably going to have to get used to getting your fix of the campaign once every 2 weeks, because we're going to be alternating and slipping in one episode at a time of whatever homebrew we're running. So it'll be Children of Fear, Heartless and Loveland for a while, and then, you know, whatever's next. Lots of ideas of our own. And as Pedro already suggested, we're looking for other writers with their own ideas as well. We're going to be offering our services. We have two wonderful writers, editors, proofreaders right here. They do playtesting as well. I mean, you know, I do the playing, they do the keeping, not just me, obviously. We have plenty of people. And I do the pictures. So we are very much, there's lots of info on our website, links, like Nathan said, in the description. But that's what we're hoping moving forward, is that basically you'll be able to enlist us to help you get your draft right the way through from whatever, you know, whatever stage you're at, whether you've got it, you know, all done and it just needs a final proofread and then putting into a lovely PDF and a cover and all the rest of it ready to go up on Miskatonic, or if you're still working on, you know, the earlier stages and it needs a couple of editing passes first. We're aiming to be a one-stop shop to help you bring your Call of Cthulhu story to life, get it up on Miskatonic, get people downloading, and, you know, the proceeds go straight to you. We're going to be doing this for, you know, like a flat fee up front, but it's not like pitching to Coyote and the story remains yours. You get the downloads and people get to play your story. And we're shooting for a pretty high, like a sort of a premium standard of quality. We take this pretty seriously, and we would love to play people's adventures on our podcast as well. I think that's going to be an offering that I hope will excite people, is that our listeners can listen to your adventure being played on the air by our extremely talented cast. Shout out to all you guys. Love you very much. So that is what the future holds.
That is definitely an ambitious and awesome set of things coming out. Well, I guess it's that time, and I wanted to take a moment and reveal that we are actually going to have a special guest that Braden kind of did some spoilers on earlier, and we're going to go ahead and welcome Mrs. Lynne Hardy. So, you know, put your hands together and let's say thank you for her. And here you go. Hi, and now we're going to welcome our very, very special guest, Lynne Hardy, the creator of this magnificent book. And we're going to go through and we're going to talk about her opinions and see her perspective and just kind of let them ask some questions and get some feels and possibly talk about some of her upcoming and awesome things such as Rivers of London, and hopefully maybe get some sneak peeks into that. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to you, Fedra, and let you ask your questions. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not going to be asking all the questions. My fellow players will also be joining in, but I'm going to start with a fan favorite question. Lynn, out of the Children of Fear Pregens, which one is your favorite? Now, this is a very, very important question, and many people have a specific name they want to hear.
Now, you know you're not supposed to have favorites among your children. But I do have a massive soft spot for two of the Pregens. I mean, I like all of them, but there are two that I do have a big soft spot for. The first is Dr. Eudora Lockhart.
And runner-up.
I take it that Adriano's playing Eudora then from that response.
That makes me very happy to hear. Yep, love her to bits.
Well, she's partly based on, and my brain has gone completely blank. Oh. It'll come to me. She is based on partly based on a real life character who is from the area that I live in, and she was involved in a whole load of stuff around the Middle East in World War I. She was kind of the woman who was doing all the hard work behind Lawrence of Arabia, basically. And I cannot believe I've forgotten her name. This is so embarrassing because she's a complicated woman. Her life story is particularly sad and tragic, but you know there's elements of Eudora in there. So she's a favorite. You know, I'm very fond of her. And of course the other one is Sophie and Bazaz Wine. And I'm guessing Braden plays him.
I brought these two in especially for you, Lynn.
No, I have a huge soft spot for Sophie. He's not really based on anyone in particular. But I think it's his relationship with his brother and why he's doing things. were, I thought, gave it a lot of heart. And then when you look at Caleb's artwork in the book that has Sophian in it, it's always very emotive, particularly one of the chapter headers. I'm not going to mention which one, but there is one of him that, you know, it sort of really gives me chills every time I see it, because it's just such an emotional picture when you know what's actually happening in it. So no, I've got a huge soft spot for Sophian. And if you look at a lot of the artwork, you will see he's quite often in the background with his camera taking pictures of things.
Oh no. If there's
No
Sophian
spoilers.
in our campaign has
spoilers.
been having tough times. So let's just say that.
It's Call of Cthulhu. We're all having rough times one way or another.
Yeah,
Back
that's
to the
true.
point.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
So when you develop like your pre-gens for each adventures, how do you go about doing that? I mean, do you really delve that deeply into the pre-gens and create an entire history behind them? What is your process with your pre-gens, if I may ask?
Try to think of characters I'd like to play that I think would be interesting for people to play. Give them interesting, coherent backgrounds that you can build on, so you've got enough meat there to sort of understand what their motivations are, where they're coming from, hopefully give you a springboard for you to then layer on your interpretation and give them their own little interesting quirks. But, you know, just something that would be fun. And obviously, when you're writing pre-gens for a campaign, you have to make sure that they have links into it. Why are they doing the things they're doing? Why are they getting involved? What are the skills that they have that are going to support everybody else getting through that story? So that's a key thing, you know, because they're all mostly legal in terms of point builds.
Mostly.
Mostly. I could do that.
I'd like to thank you just personally for not giving Eudora any points in any social skills or very much in Chinese at all, because it's made the early chapters just a tremendous amount of fun and just a great excuse to not have to be particularly charming or persuasive, I guess. So thank you just from me.
Well, there's only so many points to go around, and it's a case of she's an upper class white woman who has, she's had to fight really hard to get where she is, but she's still an upper class white woman in the 1920s.
Yeah, it was in her own specific context.
Yeah. So she's learning slowly, but you know, she still has very much that expectation that other people will speak her language rather than her necessarily speaking theirs. And also she trained in Egypt with Flinders Petrie, so you know, Chinese wasn't the main language she was planning on learning. But again, that's one of these things that I like, because then that gives you room. I hope, Phaedra, you were kind to them and let them spend extra points to customize their.
Absolutely not.
Mean.
We were supposed to get extra points.
Yes, I know.
We're going back.
Yes, restart
I always
the game.
recommend. There's only two people who don't in these pre-gens, because they were actually created with experience packages from the Investigator's Handbook, and that's Sophian and Timur, because they've both been soldiers. They've had other experiences prior to this starting, so they get a few more points. But normally, I recommend, I think it's either 50 or 70, depending on how generous I'm feeling. Extra points for the other four, so that they can sort of bring their skills up to a similar sort of level. And again, that's one I like, not necessarily putting skill points in some of the more obvious ones, because if you've got those extra points, that allows you then to pick which one you want. You know, how are you going to play? Say Eudora. I mean, you could play her as a terrifying, intimidating little person, or you could play her as the most charming, erudite person, and putting points in intimidate or charm is going to help inform how you're going to play that particular character.
I'm quite glad I didn't give the extra points, because you got to play her as very socially inept, and I think that's very amusing for everyone.
I think we all won on that score. Yeah,
there's a lot of classic Eudora moments in this campaign.
Oh, very much so.
I think it's classic Eudora. Sophian's mustache is a big one.
Yeah.
He wiggles it a lot. So.
Yeah, that's
very
my
proud
charm.
of that mustache.
Every time I'm beginning to start charming someone, start with a Sophian moustache wiggle to get it going.
That's
Prime the pump.
fantastic.
Yeah. I suppose moving on, how exactly do you go about doing your research? Because there's lots of sort of obscure areas and things in the book that aren't exactly easy to Google. Like as we've gone through chapters, looking back on them, we've tried to do like research on certain things, and yeah, there's a lot of things that are quite hard to find. How exactly do you go about doing that?
I normally start with travel guides. So I'll be looking through travel guides. If I'll just move out of the way here. So these are some of the books that were involved in Children of Fear. Some of them for other campaigns and things that I've written. Some, yes, some. There's books all over this house. There's only one room that doesn't have books in, and that's the porch, because it gets a bit damp in there sometimes. So yeah, so there's books everywhere, usually piled, as you can see. Although those aren't mine. Those are the husband's graphic novel collection, part of it. So I will start off with travel guides for the areas that I'm interested in. Usually old, cheap ones, because I don't need to know what the current hotel prices are and the latest restaurants and nightclubs and things. And when you go through those, sometimes you'll find weird little snippets of local legends or, tourist hotspots and things. And then you go and have a look at those. And then I'll try and find books. So, there's some very, very interesting books that I picked up. There's a whole series of books here by a gentleman called Peter Hopkirk. And he wrote extensively about Central Asia and Tibet and various things going on in there. And they're fantastic books. Now, I only came across those by accident because I happened to type the right keywords into Google. And one of the things that came up was actually quoting his book. So I then went and found Trespassers on the Roof of the World, which is all about the race to get to Lhasa, and read that, got notes out of that. I'll show you one. That's this Trespassers, actually. So, go through with the... So my books are actually full of these little sticky things. And then reading that book then led to more of his books. There's another guy, excuse me for turning around, Charles Allen, who wrote a huge number of books. Again, I came across him when I was working on another project, again, partly by accident, because he was referred to on a web page that I was reading, and it turned out he'd written a whole load about exploration of Tibet, the colonial experience in India in sort of like the 20th century. He'd done, I think it was a BBC radio series, and then transcribed that into a book form where he talked to people who'd worked for the British in India before independence. So, go through, read the books, make the notes, try and track down other sources if I can. But for all that the internet is wonderful, there are still huge holes in places that you can only get that information if you happen to be lucky enough to find the right book. And quite often that's luck.
Yeah, there we go. Wow.
I'm a huge fan of the fact that you were literally sifting through old tomes of forgotten lore in order to put this together. It's a value add that you can't just find this with an easy Google search. That's amazing.
They are fantastic, fascinating books. Like, Charles Allen and Peter Hopkirk's books are really good reads because they are all about sort of like white people attempting to sort of like lay claim to huge areas of land that they have no right to do so, and thieving everything that's not nailed down, which is very in keeping with pulp adventure in the 1920s and 1930s. So, if you do ever get the chance to pick any of them up and have a read, they're really interesting. And obviously there's an absolute ton of information in there that I didn't get to include. And you could easily use to write your own spin-off scenarios and things in those particular areas. There's just so much information in them.
But we were itching to ask you if there was a favorite area or legend to research that you did research. I realize that might be a little bit tricky without spoilers, but B, if there was a favorite thing that ended up on the cutting room floor and just didn't make it in, that you're at liberty to talk about, because maybe it's not going to feature in something upcoming.
I mean, the funny thing was that Children of Fear was supposed to be all the bits that got cut from Shadows of Atlantis, and that didn't happen. Because I do a ton of research. I have loads and loads of notebooks full of notes, because once I've read through these, I then write them up in a notebook. And then when I come to start fleshing out the actual campaign, I will then type up the notes that I think are going to be of use for that particular campaign. And that helps sort of get it all in there. So I'd got all this research for Shadows of Atlantis and bits. I thought, oh no, there's really interesting stuff there. I'd like to develop that further. And then when I started researching the areas, going through the guidebooks, picking up Hopkirk and Allen's books and various other people's books and reading things, it became very obvious that what I'd thought I was going to end up using, I wasn't, because the research was pointing very specifically in a couple of directions. And it was a case of, no, that's actually more interesting. It's trying to tell me something. Let's go with that. And I'm not going to say what, because that would be a massive spoiler, particularly for you two.
Not for me.
We'll block our
Not for
ears, I
Phaedra.
promise.
La, la,
no,
la, la, la.
La, 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 la. So that was the sort of like, no, the research is telling me this is where this needs to go. So the cutting room floor stuff from Shadow stayed pretty much on the cutting room floor. Yeah, there's a whole load of bits and bobs from this that, you know, I looked at were the ways that I could incorporate things. I mean, it's a while since I wrote it now, so, you know, my brain works by hanging on to the information as hard as possible for as long as I need to, and then jettisoning it really quickly when I have to go on to the next book, because there's only so much space in there now, and it's getting less every year. So, but no, there are. I mean, there's a whole load. Again, there's just like, I think I've got 4 A4 notebooks full of notes, and a
Wow.
whole load of stuff that just never got used or even typed up, that at some point I may well go back to and use for other things. There were a couple of things that I didn't think were going to make it in, actually did go in later on, just to give little extra bits and bobs in there. So the bit in Cyan, which I don't know if you've done yet, so I'm not gonna it's the one I run as the demo game. So it's in the Hereafter with the curio salesman.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, he's familiar.
Yeah. So that was something that wasn't originally going to be in there, but we decided we needed a little bit more action in Cyan, just to try and draw you in and unsettle you to start with. So, you know, that was a little bit of research that had been put to one side that then got, you know, brought back in again. That was partly inspired by a Channel 4 documentary that was about the lost treasures of ancient China. So you never quite know where you're going to get this inspiration. But yeah, no, I've got notebooks full of stuff that didn't make it and may well get used again at some point for something else.
Oh man, think of all those side quests.
What was
That
the
chapter. Oh, go ahead.
what was the decision to make this a pulp adventure rather than a classics adventure? Why did y'all choose to go one route versus the other?
We're doing this as classic.
Right. I know, because the thing is that we're trying to give people the option, because obviously it takes a long time to write campaigns and get them edited and all the artwork and everything done and get them tested out. I mean, it's notorious. This one was about 5 years from start to finish.
Wow.
I do, you know, in my defense, I was working on Masks of Nyarlathotep and other things in the middle of that, so it wasn't completely 5 years. But if we give people classic stats and pulp stats, then it's up to them how they want to play it. I mean, this one in particular has shades of Indiana Jones in it because of the amount of distance that you're covering, the fact that it is based on a lot of what Western archaeologists were doing in Central Asia, India and Tibet in that time period, i.e. wholesale stealing everything that was and wasn't nailed down, to be quite fair. So it's got a pulp feel to it, so that it made sense to have pulp rules and pulp characters and things like that in there, as well as going the classic creepy horror route.
Go ahead, guys.
I was just going to say that chapter we were talking about before in Cyan has my favorite all-time NPC ever in it. Professor Thaddeus Johnson.
Oh,
he's great.
It was amazing.
It was fun to play.
I don't know how much we can talk about it, but a particular object he's looking for has some links to other stories, which may not, maybe just red herrings, but we were immediately like, oh my gosh.
Definitely pricked our ears up, like he's looking for a what? Yeah.
I couldn't possibly comment.
I didn't even realize reading it the first time. It was quite funny. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Where are they going next?
Yeah. You just put it
And
out
that's
there
the
and we're
great
all
thing.
like,
You
wait,
just put little,
what?
you put these things in, and it quite often happens that players will just go running off in a direction that you really didn't think, and make all these really weird connections. It's like, oh, all right, oh, okay, I'm going to do something with that now. So this is one of the reasons I love hearing what people have actually done with it, because of course I know what was in my head when I was writing it. I know what happened when I play tested it, and some of that made it into the campaign as well. Suggestions from other playtest groups made it in there too, for little things to add or tidy up or tighten up. But reading people's comments and hearing what people have been doing with it, it's kind of like, wow, oh, I never thought of that. Oh no, that's really good. So it's always a bit scary hearing what people have been doing, because you never quite know whether they're going to like it or not. But it's also fascinating to see how different groups make different connections and do different things and tackle things in different ways. And yeah, that's part of the joy of doing this, really, is just seeing people making it their own and really going for it. That's a fantastic thing to see.
Yeah, I'm
think we even
actually
started
running
on-
this twice, once for the podcast and one as a play-by-post with another group on a Discord server. So I'm getting real-time people doing different things in the same place. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you never run the same scenario twice, even if you are running the same scenario. It's just, yeah, because you do have different people play characters in very, very different ways. And it's one of those fascinating things to see, because a lot of people have played Eudora and no one has played her the same twice.
That's for sure.
So when you're playtesting your adventures and your modules, what is your process for that? And like, do you personally run them? Do you send them off to other people? How does that generally work?
Yeah. Well, I always play test my own stuff to make sure that it's working. But there's always a problem with that, because I know what the background is. I know what the gaps are. Well, I don't know what the gaps are. The problem is that I don't see the gaps because I'm filling them in as I'm running it, because I know what the background material is. I've done all the research. I know where I want it to be going and where I think it should be going. You've got to then send it to other people to spot the gaps, because it's like editing your own work. You know what it's supposed to say. That's not what it necessarily says. So you need a fresh set of eyes on it to make sure that all of the relevant information is there for someone else to run it. And that was the interesting thing with this, was because being British and having had the education that I've had, I was making certain assumptions about what other people would know. And it became obvious with the American playtest groups that there were certain bits of history that they didn't know. So we were putting extra little sidebars and things in to just explain certain situations that they may not have heard of. It's where the What Your Investigator Knows handouts came from, because this is a part of the world that even people in the 1920s didn't necessarily know a huge amount about, and a lot of people now don't, because it isn't somewhere where Call of Cthulhu set a huge amount of adventures. It's not somewhere that certain parts of it are places that don't get an awful lot of news coverage. So it was important to know how to support players as well as their investigators, so that they could get into it. I mean, part of the reason for setting it where it is was to have sort of like a double layer of unsettlement going on, if that makes sense. So that, you've got the whole mythos thing going on, which is supposed to be unsettling and unnerving for the characters, but you've also got that thing for the players of, well, this is somewhere new and we don't know everything about it, so we can't second guess really what's going on, because it's not New England in 1920, which we all know a ton about because we've played a whole load of Call of Cthulhu scenarios.
Makes sense.
It was metagaming slightly, which is a bit naughty, but
I think it feels like we're seeing more and more exciting and different settings for Call of Cthulhu, kind of rather than the classic setting everything in New England, which is, I think it really adds an extra dimension, because I think Call of Cthulhu has a real power that in which, like, through it you can learn so much, and that's a really cool part as a keeper as well. I was wondering, is there a setting that you haven't yet got to work on that you'd really like to?
Yes,
Maybe
it's
in the
never going to
future.
happen.
Oh, what would you tell us what it is?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is actually it's a question that I was asked at Gen Con a few years ago, the last time I was there.
Mhm.
And it was what time period do you think hasn't been developed properly or enough for Call of Cthulhu? And of course, it's the Tudor period, is the Elizabethan
Mm.
period, and
Oh.
I would dearly love to get that done. Um, and it was one of the things I really hoped to get done before I sort of became associate editor. But once I became associate editor, of course, I've got other things that I need to take care of and worry about. All of which are great products, but it means that my chances of actually sitting down and writing anything big again are pretty small, because the whole thing is that we have wonderful books from other authors that need editing, need getting into the pipeline so that we can get them all out for you to play. But at some point, I would like to hopefully find, the right authors to do that and get that commissioned and get that rolling, because I think that would be a really cool setting.
Yeah, definitely.
That would straight up be amazing. And I like there's the popularity of like the Tudors TV series and stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of history nerds and just people who like historical dramas and stuff that would absolutely lap that up. Plus, Henry VIII was an incredibly shady guy. He seems like exactly the kind of person who'd be acting in thrall to some eldritch deity.
Totally. I mean, I have, fortunately, it's one of the things that's coming out probably next year now, but it's about to go into layout, is Regency Cthulhu. So Andy Peregrine came to us with a scenario and some details, and I got to develop that into an actual little period supplement. So that's on its way. That was one of the ones that's been ticked and crossed off now.
Nice. We were going to ask you if you're playing or running any games at the moment in your very busy schedule. I don't know if that's a personal question.
Oh, I don't mind talking about it at all. I've got a couple of games coming up for Gen Con this week, one of which will be in the Hereafter, which is that Sian segment, which I run as a demo game and an introduction for Children of Fear. On Sunday, I'm actually playtesting something that may or may not end up in the upcoming Gaslight update. It depends on whether I get a chance to write it. You can see the hedgehog on the
Yes.
pile
Yes.
up there. Yeah. That's my little character in a homebrew game that a friend is running for me for our group. So that's where we're all playing fey characters wandering around in a dark wood, getting into all sorts of mischief. And there's a very, very evil philosopher who is trying to hunt down fairies and do terrible things to them. So we're all trying to avoid him, although one of us did just get captured again by him. So that's not good. So that's been a huge amount of fun. I think we're due to start playtesting something for Call of Cthulhu again fairly soon, but I'm not sure what's on the slate.
Mm.
With all your playtesting, I mean, I admire that you're still, going out of your way to play games. How do you keep your motivation up? Because I mean, 5 years spent on Children of Fear is a long time, and I assume there were so many different play tests going through it. How do you keep your motivation up to keep going on a project that's so big like that?
It gets very tiring towards the end. It really does. And particularly because I never had a straight run at it. I was always having to go off and work on other things, all of which were great learning experiences and helped get me the job I've got now. But yeah, it's very hard when you have to put something down for a year or so and then try and remember what you were doing with it and where you were going with it. So the book that came out isn't exactly the book that I started writing, because obviously things changed. I found other stuff in the meantime, other things to feed into it. And these things are very organic. They tend to take on a life of their own and go in directions you weren't necessarily expecting. Sometimes it can be really hard. I mean, the last 18 months has not been easy on anybody's creative process, because you're not going out, you're not visiting museums, you're not interacting with people, which is where a lot of that inspiration comes from. You know, every year I would go down to Dragon Meet, and I'd spend 3 or 4 days around either side of that in London, and I would go to the Wellcome Collection. I'd go to usually the British Museum, up into the British Library, see what exhibitions they had on. Occasionally the V&A, you know, wherever had interesting exhibitions, you'd go to those. And those can be really, really useful and important. There was a fantastic exhibition on at the Wellcome Collection that I went to when I was researching Children of Fear, which was all about Buddhism and artifacts to do with Buddhism. And Wellcome Collection are fantastic. They put out handbooks that have, you know, all the notations from all the artifacts and things, so you can get those from their website. So that had some really useful information in. I only found out about that because I was wandering around literally writing everything down in a tiny little notebook, and a very helpful curator came over and said, no, just go at the front desk and tell them what you want and they will send you this thing. And quite often you can find them online as well. So there were a couple of very, very good. Dr. Pyra Mal actually came around because we were at another exhibition at the Wellcome, where it was his collection of letters, because Pyra Mal is a real guy. He worked for Wellcome out in India collecting stuff, and it was the most fascinating collection, because you've actually got his letters that are kept by the Wellcome Collection, all sorts of amazing things in there. So he became an interesting real life person that you can talk to and contact, and the keeper can use how they need to. But again, you see, that's all something that when I started writing the book I never expected. But I went to an exhibition, I saw him, he was perfect for my uses, hopefully for the keeper to use in interesting ways. And you know, you don't get that if you can't go to places. A lot of museums have been doing fantastic virtual tours of things, which in some ways has allowed you to go to things that you wouldn't necessarily have got. But it's still not the same as actually being there in person and seeing things and seeing all those little flaws and imperfections, and just sort of like immersing yourself in it. So yeah, sometimes it can be really hard, and sometimes you just have to go off and do something completely unrelated that has nothing to do with it at all, just to give your brain time to stop and think about other things. And quite often things will be whirring around in the background without you being aware of it. And then when you sit back down at the keyboard, it could be a case of, oh, right, okay, didn't think of that before. And it'll just start coming out of your fingertips as you're typing badly and correcting things.
Nice.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep you too long, but I definitely wanted to hit you on a couple of upcoming projects. The last time we had you on, we discussed the Rivers of London project. Is there any more that you can give us on that?
Oh, well, I'm currently not doing as much Call of Cthulhu, although it keeps dragging me back in. I'm currently concentrating on Rivers of London. It's in final editorial. So I'm busy working through that now. The artwork has been commissioned, so we've got preliminary sketches and things coming in for that. The maps have been commissioned, so you know we're getting preliminaries and things in for that too. So it's now just down to me to get on with it and get my head down, and get it all sorted, and sort of like keep directing the art. So we've got lovely, lovely pictures to go in it. Obviously, in collaboration with Ben. Ben gets to see all of the sketches, make sure he's happy with them. He gives us feedback on things that we've missed or things we haven't realized or extra things he's come up with to help us. So there's going to be little bits throughout that, you know, Ben has contributed to the book, little boxes that say Ben says, and other little bits of fiction and things that have gone in there. Obviously, there's a brand new original piece of fiction will be at the front of the book written by Ben specifically for it. So yeah, no, it's coming along really nicely actually. It's just going to be, you know, it's a big book. It needs a lot of putting it together because there's quite a lot of authors worked on it. So it's marrying everything together and making sure there's a consistent tone all the way through it. So it's great. It's actually really good fun.
And anything else that you're currently working on or putting out soon?
Well, Regency Cthulhu is the last big Cthulhu one I worked on, and it was once that was wrapped up and Time to Harvest was proofed, so that should be the next book out, Time to Harvest. I'm kind of, like I said, I've kind of stepped back from Call of Cthulhu so we can make sure that we get Rivers of London out as soon as possible for people, because it's been in development for a couple of years now, so we want to be able to get that out ASAP, really. But yeah, there's plenty of Call of Cthulhu stuff coming, don't worry. You know, I know I've jokingly said before, we have probably at least 10 years worth of books in the editorial folders waiting to go. You know, Mike is busy working on a whole load of interesting new stuff set in the traditional settings.
Might have to
which-
hit him up and see if I can bug him. And
So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on. Some of which has been announced, some of which hasn't been announced, but nobody's running out of Call of Cthulhu stuff anytime soon. And as soon as Rivers is wrapped, I will be straight back onto it, which is probably going to be. No, I'm not going to say that because that'll jinx it. Sometime soonish, shall we say?
excellent. Do you guys have anything else before we let Lynn go?
It was very lovely meeting you.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much
Thank you.
for all the lovely answers to our questions.
Yeah, it's been a delight.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah,
Are you enjoying yourselves playing it?
So
course.
much.
very much.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to keep.
Brilliant. That's at the end of the day, that's all I can really hope for, is that people enjoy reading it, playing it, and you know, like I said before, making it their own. So thank you very much. That's really lovely to hear.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
All
Lovely
right.
to talk to you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye. And we're out for that. Lynn, thank you. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching this episode. And I want to thank my special guest, Fedra, Mr. Howl, and Braden for coming on, and our super awesome special guest, Lynne Hardy. Thank you. You're great as always. And I look forward to seeing you guys shortly with our next video. Thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Y'all are wonderful. Take care.
Bye.
Hey.
Bye.